The peasant woman fed a stray wolf, never knowing he was the Alpha King. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of Thornhaven's lower district like a burial shroud, seeping through the cracks in the walls and the gaps beneath doors where the poor had stuffed rags to keep out the cold. Ilara wrapped her threadbare cloak tighter around her thin shoulders as she made her way through the narrow alleyways, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The bruise on her cheek, a parting gift from the tax collector who'd found her week's earnings insufficient, throbbed with its familiar ache, worse in the cold, always worse when the winter winds swept down from the northern mountains. 23 winters she had survived in these streets, 23 winters of being invisible, unless someone needed someone to blame, to beat, to use as an example of what happened to those who couldn't pay their dues to the wolf-blessed nobility who ruled these lands. She'd learned to walk with her head down, but her senses alert, to make herself small but never completely invisible. Invisibility suggested you were hiding something, and peasants with secrets were beaten on principle. The art of being poor was the art of being precisely as noticeable as was expected, present enough to work, absent enough to never offend those who mattered. She'd learned it from her mother, God's rest her soul, who died 5 winters past from the coughing sickness that took so many in the lower district, when medicine was reserved for those who could afford it. The streets were already beginning to stir despite the early hour. Mrs. Harwick was opening her laundry, the steam from her washing vats mixing with the morning fog. The old woman nodded to Ilara, a tiny gesture that meant everything between those who had nothing. Thomas, the street sweeper, was already at work, his back bent from years of labor, his hands gnarled from the cold that seeped into old bones and never left. A few merchants were setting up their stalls in the small market square, their eyes sliding over Ilara as if she were part of the architecture, just another piece of the scenery in their daily routine. The bakery where she worked sat wedged between a tannery and a wheelwright's shop, its chimney already breathing smoke into the dawn air. The building leaned slightly to the left, as if exhausted from centuries of standing, and the sign above the door, Cromwell's Fine Breads, swung on rusty hinges that screamed like tortured souls when the wind caught them. Master Cromwell would be expecting her to have the ovens fully heated before the first customers arrived, the floors swept, the display cases cleaned until they gleamed. Any deviation from perfection would mean a beating if she was lucky, a reduction in her already meager wages if she was not, and starvation if the gods truly despised her that day. Ilara paused at the sight of something huddled against the bakery's back wall. At first, she thought it was a pile of rags. The homeless often sought shelter in this alley, though Cromwell usually chased them away with a broom handle or worse, his iron-tipped cane that had left scars on more than one beggar's back. But then the pile shifted, and she saw the rise and fall of labored breathing, heard the wheeze that spoke of damaged lungs or broken ribs. A wolf, massive even in its obvious state of starvation, lay curled beneath the eaves. Its grey fur was matted with blood and mud, ribs visible through its dull coat, like the bars of a cage. One eye was swollen shut, and there were wounds, so many wounds that spoke of a desperate fight for survival. Any sensible peasant would have run. Wolves were the sacred beasts of the Alpha bloodlines, creatures of magic and power that belonged to a world far above her station. For someone like her to approach such a creature was not just forbidden, it was madness. She'd once seen a young woman flogged until her back was nothing but red ruins for the crime of touching a noble's horse. What would they do to someone who dared approach an Alpha's wolf? But looking at this creature, clearly abandoned and dying, Ilara felt something crack in her chest. She recognized that particular stillness, the kind that came when you were deciding whether fighting to breathe was worth the effort anymore. She'd seen it in her mother's eyes near the end, had felt it in her own heart on the coldest nights when her empty stomach cramped and her frozen fingers could barely move. The wolf's golden eye opened as she approached, tracking her movements with an intelligence that seemed almost human. There was no aggression in that gaze, only a weary watchfulness that she recognized from her own reflection in puddles and broken windows. The wolf tried to lift its head, but couldn't manage more than a few inches before collapsing back down. "Oh, you poor thing," Ilara whispered, her voice rough from disuse. She rarely spoke anymore. Who was there to talk to? What have they done to you? She reached into her satchel and pulled out the heel of bread she'd saved for her own breakfast, along with the strip of dried meat that was meant to last her through the week. Her stomach cramped in protest. She'd eaten nothing since yesterday morning, and that had been only thin gruel and a handful of withered turnips. But she pushed the sensation aside. She'd survived hunger before. She wasn't sure this magnificent creature would survive another hour without help. "I know it's not much," she said softly, setting the food down within reach and stepping back. "But it's all I have." "Well, that's not entirely true. I have half a cabbage in my room, but it's mostly rotten, and I don't think wolves eat cabbage anyway, though honestly I'm not sure I should eat it either." The wolf struggled to its feet, each movement clearly causing agony. It limped forward, favoring its left foreleg heavily, dragging its back right leg in a way that suggested serious damage. As it ate, slowly and with difficulty, Ilara noticed the deep gashes along its flank, too clean to be from a fight with another animal, too deliberate to be accidental. These were blade wounds. Someone had tried to kill this wolf with systematic precision. Without thinking, she tore strips from the bottom of her already ragged dress. The cold immediately bit through the new gaps in her clothing, raising goosebumps on her exposed skin. But she ignored it. Her mother had taught her basic healing before she died, the kind of knowledge passed between poor women who couldn't afford proper healers. "This is probably foolish," she murmured, moving closer slowly, her hands visible and movements telegraphed. "You could tear my throat out with a single bite. But then again, Master Cromwell might beat me to death tomorrow for burning the bread. So really, what's the difference? At least dying to help something would have meaning." The wolf tensed, but didn't growl as she carefully cleaned the worst of the wounds with water from her flask. Her drinking water for the day, but the creature needed it more. This close, she could see that beneath the dirt and blood, the wolf's coat had once been magnificent, a silver grey that would have shimmered in sunlight like moonbeams on water. There were scars too, older ones that spoke of previous battles, of a life lived in violence. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" Ilara murmured, working with practiced efficiency despite her trembling hands. "Running from something, or someone. I understand that feeling, though I suppose you can actually run. Best I can do is hide, and hope whatever's hunting me gets bored or distracted by easier prey." She applied a poultice of herbs she'd gathered from the forest edge, comfrey for healing, calendula for infection, willow bark for pain. They were the same herbs she used on her own wounds, carefully hoarded and rationed, because gathering more meant risking the forest where peasants weren't supposed to go. The bakery door slammed open with such force that Ilara jumped, accidentally pulling a bandage too tight. The wolf winced, but didn't snap at her, though she saw its impressive fangs when its lips pulled back in pain. "Ilara," Master Cromwell's voice boomed across the courtyard. "Where are you, worthless wretch? These ovens won't light themselves. I've got orders from Lord Pemberton's estate, and if they're not ready by noon, I'll take the loss out of your worthless hide." The wolf's ears flattened against its skull, and a low growl rumbled from its chest that Ilara felt in her bones. For a moment, she saw what this creature must have been like in its prime. Terrible and magnificent, a predator that could tear through armies. "It's all right," Ilara said softly, placing a calming hand on its massive head. The fur was softer than she'd expected beneath the grime and warm despite the cold morning. "He's cruel, but predictable. Tuesdays are the worst. That's when he tallies the week's profits and usually finds reasons to be disappointed. Today's Thursday, so he'll mostly just yell. But if he sees you," she shuddered, "he'd sell word of your presence to the first noble he could find, wounded wolf or not. The reward would be more than he makes in a year. Stay here, stay hidden. I'll bring you more food when I can." She stood to leave, then paused, looking back at those intelligent golden eyes. "Don't die, please. I know that's a lot to ask, considering your condition, but I've seen too much death. My mother, my neighbors, the children who starve every winter while grain rots in noble storehouses. I couldn't bear to add you to that list." The wolf's tail, what she could see of it, moved slightly, not quite a wag, but an acknowledgement, as if it understood not just her words, but the feeling behind them. The interior of the bakery was already sweltering despite the cold morning. The great ovens that dominated the back wall radiated heat like the mouths of dragons, and Ilara immediately began sweating through her torn dress. Master Cromwell stood in the middle of the workspace, his massive belly straining against a stained apron, his piggy eyes narrowed with suspicion. His face was already red with drink despite the early hour. He started each day with ale and ended it with stronger stuff. "You're late," he snarled, though Ilara was actually early by any reasonable measure. "And what happened to your dress? You look even more pathetic than usual, which I didn't think was possible." "Caught it on a nail, Master Cromwell," Ilara said, keeping her eyes down. She'd learned long ago that meeting Cromwell's gaze was interpreted as defiance, and defiance meant pain. "Careless slut, that comes out of your wages." Cromwell's meaty hand shot out and caught Ilara by the hair, yanking her head back painfully. She could smell the stale beer on his breath, see the breakfast stuck in his yellowed teeth. "You cost me more than you're worth. If the law didn't require me to employ at least one peasant woman for the delicate work, I'd have thrown you out years ago, or sold you to the brothels. At least then you'd earn your keep on your back." Ilara said nothing. Defending herself would only make things worse. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, still had the scars on her back from the time she'd dared to point out that she'd worked 3 days straight without sleep during the harvest festival. After a moment, Cromwell released her with a shove that sent her stumbling toward the ovens. "Get to work. The sourdough needs starting, and there are 3 dozen meat pies to prepare for the Pemberton order. And if I find even a speck of dirt on those display cases, you'll regret it. I've got a new cane iron cord, and I'm itching to test it." The day progressed as it always did, a blur of kneading, mixing, baking, and cleaning. Ilara's hands, already cracked from the harsh lye soap Cromwell insisted she use, began bleeding by noon. She wrapped them in scraps of cloth and kept working. Blood in the bread meant a beating. Stopping work meant starvation. The choice was simple, even if nothing about it was easy. Several customers came in throughout the day, beta merchants who looked through her as if she were invisible, minor nobles who wrinkled their noses at having to be in the same room as a peasant, the occasional alpha guard or official who made her skin crawl with the way they looked at her. Not with desire, she wasn't pretty enough for that anymore, but with the casual calculation of someone deciding whether she was worth the effort to torment. Lord Pemberton himself arrived in the afternoon, fat and sweating despite the cold, his Omega servant trailing behind him with her head down. The girl, she couldn't have been more than 16, had a black eye and moved stiffly as if her ribs were bruised or broken. "Cromwell!" Pemberton boomed. "Where are my pies?" "Ready and waiting, my lord," Cromwell simpered, suddenly obsequious. "Ilara, bring Lord Pemberton's order!" Ilara carried the heavy basket of pies, her arms trembling with the weight. As she set them down, she accidentally met the Omega servant's eyes. The girl looked away quickly, but not before Ilara saw the despair there, the same look she'd seen in so many faces in the lower district. "These better be worth what I'm paying," Pemberton grumbled, though the pies were perfect. Ilara had made sure of that. "Of course, my lord, and might I add, your servant looks like she could use some bread, perhaps something soft. She seems to be having difficulty with solid food." Pemberton laughed, an ugly sound. "The stupid bitch tried to steal from me. A few missing teeth will remind her of her place." He grabbed the Omega girl by the arm, fingers digging in hard enough to leave bruises. "Won't it, pet?" "Yes, master," the girl whispered. They left, and Ilara had to grip the counter to keep from doing something stupid, like throwing a knife at Pemberton's broad back. It wouldn't help the girl. It would only get Ilara killed, and then who would feed the wolf? During the brief lunch break, 10 minutes that Cromwell grudgingly allowed so she wouldn't faint from hunger, Ilara managed to secret away several rolls that had been deemed too misshapen to sell. She also pocketed scraps of meat from the pies, her heart racing with the fear of being caught. Theft was a serious crime for a peasant, punishable by public flogging or worse. She'd seen people lose hands for stealing bread. It wasn't until well after dark that she was finally able to slip away. Cromwell had kept her late, scrubbing the ovens, finding fault with every effort until her knees were raw from kneeling on the stone floor, her hands bloody from the caustic soap. When she finally stumbled out into the alley, exhausted and aching, she half expected to find the wolf gone or dead. Instead, it had moved itself deeper into the shadows, almost invisible except for that one golden eye that reflected the moonlight. It was shivering, and Ilara realized with a pang that wolves, even magical alpha wolves, could still feel cold. "Still alive then," she said softly, approaching with the food she'd saved. "That's good. That's wonderful, actually. I spent all day terrified I'd come back to find a corpse." She pulled out a moth-eaten blanket she'd taken from her own meager bed. Her only blanket, which meant she'd spend tonight shivering, but the wolf needed it more. "This isn't much, but it's warm." "Well, warmer than nothing, which I suppose isn't saying much." The wolf watched her arrange the blanket into a sort of nest, its tail twitching slightly. As it ate the food she'd brought more delicately than any starving creature should, Ilara found herself talking. She wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was the strange comfort of having someone, something, that couldn't judge her for her words, couldn't use them against her later. "Lord Pemberton came by today," she said, settling herself against the opposite wall, far enough away to give the wolf space, but close enough to feel less alone. "Fat bastard ordered 3 dozen meat pies but complained about the price the entire time. His Omega servant, just a girl really, had a black eye and missing teeth. He bragged about it, bragged about beating a child for being hungry enough to steal." The wolf's ears perked forward, its attention fully on her. "That's the thing about being poor, being powerless," Ilara continued, pulling her knees to her chest. "Everyone sees the bruises, the suffering, the starvation. They just don't care. We're not people to them. We're resources, things that produce labor until we break, and then we're replaced." She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what the life expectancy is for someone like me? 35 if I'm lucky. Most peasant women are dead by 30, worn out from work and childbirth and hunger. My mother made it to 38, which was considered remarkable. I'm 23, so I'm already past the halfway point of my likely life." The wolf made a sound that wasn't quite a whine, something that almost sounded sympathetic. It was probably her imagination, but she appreciated it nonetheless. "I had a sister once," she found herself saying, words she hadn't spoken in years spilling out. "Mira. She was prettier than me, which was her curse. When she turned 14, Lord Thaddeus, he's the provincial governor, saw her at market, had his guards take her to the castle. She was going to be a maid, they said. We all knew what that meant." Her voice cracked. "She lasted 6 months before she threw herself from the tower. They didn't even return her body for proper burial, said peasants who killed themselves didn't deserve it." The wolf moved then, slowly, and obviously in pain, until it was closer to her. Not touching, but near enough that she could feel its warmth. It was more comfort than she'd received from another living being since her mother died. Days passed in this pattern. Each morning before dawn, Ilara would check on the wolf, bringing whatever food she could spare and sometimes medical supplies pilfered from Cromwell's personal cabinet. Each evening after work, she'd return to tend wounds and talk about the day. The wolf grew stronger gradually, though its recovery was slow. The wounds were severe, and infection had set in despite her herbs. On the 4th night, she arrived to find the wolf burning with fever, barely conscious. Panic seized her. She'd seen too many die from infected wounds, watched the fever consume them until nothing was left but cooling flesh. "No!" she whispered fiercely, dropping to her knees beside the creature. "No, you don't get to die. Not after I've invested so much bread in keeping you alive." She ran to the forest edge, risking the patrols that would flog her for poaching, and gathered the strongest healing herbs she knew. Feverfew for the temperature, echinacea for infection, golden seal that was worth its weight in silver if the nobles knew peasants were harvesting it. She brewed them into a paste, mixing it with the last of her water, and carefully spooned it into the wolf's mouth. She stayed with it all night, missing her morning shift for the first time in 3 years. She bathed its head with cool water, whispered prayers to God she wasn't sure existed, and held that massive head in her lap when the convulsions came. "Please," she begged, not sure who she was begging. "Please don't take this one too. You've taken everyone else, my mother, my sister, my friends. Let me keep this one. Let me save just one." Near dawn, the fever broke. The wolf's breathing steadied, and that golden eye opened, focused and aware. It licked her hand, the first time it had initiated contact, and Ilara burst into tears. "You stupid, magnificent creature," she sobbed, burying her face in its fur. "Don't you dare scare me like that again." When she finally returned to the bakery, Cromwell was waiting with his new cane. The beating was savage, worse than any before. He broke 2 of her fingers and left welts that would scar, all while screaming about lost profits and worthless peasants who thought they could skip work. But Ilara endured it with a strange sense of peace. The wolf was alive. She'd saved something for once in her powerless life. She'd actually saved something. On the 7th night, she arrived to find the wolf standing, stronger than she'd seen it yet. But there was an agitation to its movements, a restlessness that spoke of danger. Then she heard what its superior hearing had already detected, voices getting closer and the distinctive clink of armor. "Search every alley," someone commanded. "Lord Thaddeus wants that wolf found. Check every shadow, every hidden corner. The beast is wounded and couldn't have gone far." Ilara's blood turned to ice. Lord Thaddeus, the man who'd driven her sister to death, who ruled the province with casual cruelty. If he was hunting this wolf personally, "You have to go," she whispered urgently, grabbing the wolf's massive head between her hands, ignoring the pain from her broken fingers. "They're coming for you." "Lord Thaddeus." The wolf's reaction to the name was immediate and visceral. A snarl ripped from its throat that made every hair on Ilara's body stand on end. For a moment, something flickered in the air around it, like heat shimmer on a summer day. The very atmosphere seemed to bend, reality stuttering, and she could have sworn she saw the outline of a man superimposed over the wolf's form, young, powerful, with storm-gray hair. "You know him." It wasn't a question. She studied the wolf's face, seeing for the first time not just intelligence but human intelligence. The way it held itself despite its injuries, the careful way it had taken food from her hands, the way it listened, truly listened, when she spoke. "You're not just any wolf, are you? You're one of them, an alpha. You're a shifter." The wolf stepped closer, and Ilara should have been terrified. A peasant this close to an alpha's wolf form was unthinkable, forbidden by every law, and punishable by death. The power differential was absolute. This creature was everything she was not, belonged to a world that saw her as less than dirt. But all she felt was the same warm companionship that had grown between them over the past week. The wolf pressed its forehead against her chest, a gesture that felt like acknowledgement, like gratitude, like something deeper she didn't have words for. "It doesn't matter," Ilara said firmly, though her heart was racing. "Alpha or not, you're hurt and they're hunting you. There's a gap in the city wall near the old mill. No one guards it because the stream there is too shallow for boats, but too swift for crossing on foot. But you're strong enough now, you could make it." The wolf pulled back, those golden eyes boring into hers with an intensity that made her feel naked, seen in a way she'd never been seen before. Then it did something that sent lightning through her entire body. It licked her broken fingers, gently, carefully, and the pain stopped. Not diminished, not dulled, stopped entirely. "Go," she whispered, though the word tore at her throat. "Please. If they find you here, they'll kill us both, and I can't watch you die. Not after, just go." The wolf hesitated for a long moment, then turned and loped toward the direction she had indicated. But before it disappeared into the darkness, it looked back once, and in that golden gaze she saw a promise. She wasn't sure what it promised, but it filled her with warmth she hadn't felt since her mother's last embrace. Then it was gone, and Ilara was alone again. The search party arrived not 10 minutes later. They tore through the lower district with vicious thoroughness, upending market stalls, breaking down doors, terrorizing anyone who couldn't answer their questions fast enough. 3 peasants were flogged for imagined defiance, one for taking too long to answer, another for answering too quickly, a third for having the audacity to ask what was happening. Master Cromwell was questioned extensively in his shop, while Ilara stood silent in the corner, her broken fingers throbbing. Lord Thaddeus himself led the interrogation, his cold eyes passing over Ilara without truly seeing her. She was too insignificant to notice. "Has your peasant been behaving strangely?" Thaddeus asked, his voice like ice over steel. "No more than usual, my lord," Cromwell replied obsequiously. "She's simple-minded, barely capable of following basic instructions. Disappeared for a whole morning, the worthless bitch. But I beat her thoroughly for it. She won't be walking straight for a week." Thaddeus moved closer to Ilara, and she fought not to recoil from the Alpha's presence. This close, his power was like a physical weight, pressing down on her shoulders. This was the man who'd killed her sister, who ruled through fear and violence. "You, peasant, have you seen anything unusual?" "No, my lord," Ilara whispered, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. "Look at me when I speak to you." Ilara raised her eyes slowly, meeting that cold grey gaze. Thaddeus's face was all sharp angles and cruel beauty, the kind of face that had never known a moment of genuine warmth. She thought of Mira, of how terrified she must have been facing this man. "There are consequences for lying to an Alpha," Thaddeus said softly, dangerously. "Especially for lying to me. I have ways of making peasants tell the truth that you wouldn't enjoy. Your sister learned that lesson well before she chose the coward's way out." The casual cruelty of mentioning Mira almost broke Ilara's composure. Her hands clenched, broken fingers screaming, but she kept her face blank. "I understand, my lord. Do you, I wonder?" Thaddeus reached out and grabbed her chin, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Such a pathetic creature. Sometimes I think we're too generous, allowing your kind to live among us at all. You contribute nothing of value." He released her with a shove that sent her crashing into the wall. "If either of you see or hear anything, you will report it immediately. The wolf I'm hunting is dangerous, a traitor to the natural order. Any peasant found harboring it will face immediate execution, along with their entire household, their entire street, if necessary." After they left, Cromwell rounded on Ilara. "If you've brought trouble to my door, wretch, I'll kill you myself before letting them take me down with you." "I've done nothing, Master Cromwell. You better not have." The baker's fist caught her across the face, reopening the cut on her cheek. "Get to your room. No food for a week. Let hunger remind you of your place." Life returned to its grinding normalcy over the following weeks, though Ilara found herself looking for grey fur in every shadow, listening for the pad of paws that never came. The loss sat in her chest like a stone, heavier than any burden she'd carried before. She'd been a fool to grow attached, to think that something from the Alpha world could ever truly belong in her small, insignificant existence. Her broken fingers healed poorly without proper treatment, leaving them crooked and painful. Cromwell delighted in finding tasks that required fine dexterity, watching her struggle with sadistic pleasure. The other workers, all peasants like her, offered what small kindnesses they could. A bit of salve here, a shared crust of bread there, the solidarity of the powerless. 3 weeks after the wolf's escape, news reached the lower district that sent shockwaves through the entire kingdom. The old Alpha King was dead, had been dead for 3 months, the information kept secret while the succession was determined. And now, at the Harvest Festival, the new Alpha King would be crowned. "I heard he's young," one merchant whispered to another as Ilara swept the bakery floor. "Barely 25 winters." "I heard he's been traveling the provinces in secret," another replied, "testing the loyalty of the governors. I heard," a third voice added conspiratorially, "that there was an assassination attempt, that someone tried to kill him before he could take the throne. Lord Thaddeus was involved somehow." Ilara's hands stilled on the broom. An assassination attempt. A wounded wolf. Lord Thaddeus's desperate search. The pieces clicked together in her mind like the tumblers of a lock, and she had to grab the counter to keep from falling. The wolf, her wolf, couldn't be. The harvest festival arrived with all its traditional pageantry. For the nobility, it meant feasts and celebrations. For peasants, it meant only longer hours and harder labor. Master Cromwell had been commissioned to provide dozens of specialty breads and pastries for the castle's great feast. And he drove his workers like animals, demanding perfection that would reflect well on his establishment. "If even one loaf is less than perfect," Cromwell threatened, his face red with stress and greed, "I'll break every finger on your worthless hands, the ones that aren't already broken anyway." He laughed at his own joke. Ilara worked through exhaustion, through hunger, through the constant pain in her back and legs and hands. She shaped dough into elaborate sculptures, crafted pastries so delicate they looked like lace, created bread that was as much art as sustenance. Her crooked fingers screamed with every movement, but she persevered. She had survived worse. She always survived. It was near midnight when the interruption came. Ilara was elbow-deep in dough for the final batch, her back a symphony of agony from hours of kneading, when the bakery door exploded inward. Not opened, exploded, torn from its hinges by a force that sent splinters flying through the air like tiny daggers. Master Cromwell's indignant shout died in his throat as figures in black armor poured through the opening, their wolf sigils gleaming in the lamplight. These weren't city guards or even provincial soldiers. These were royal guards, the elite warriors who protected the crown itself. The peasant woman Ilara of Thornhaven, the lead soldier intoned, his voice muffled by his helm but carrying absolute authority. "You will come with us." "Day, what is the meaning of this?" Master Cromwell blustered, though his voice shook. "This peasant is my property, my employee. You can't just..." The soldier's gauntleted hand moved so fast, Cromwell didn't even have time to flinch. The backhand sent the baker crashing into his own ovens, blood streaming from his nose. "The woman comes with us," the soldier repeated, as if Cromwell's protest had been nothing more than the buzzing of an insect. "By order of the crown." Rough hands seized Ilara's arms, and she didn't resist. There was no point. Whatever Lord Thaddeus had finally decided to accuse her of, fighting would only make it worse. They dragged her through the streets, and she noticed with distant surprise that they weren't heading toward the provincial governor's manor, as she'd expected, but toward the castle itself. The streets were filled with festival-goers, nobles in their finest silks and velvets, all of whom stopped to stare as the guards marched past with their prisoner. Ilara heard whispers following in their wake, speculation about what crime a peasant could have committed to warrant royal attention. Some suggested theft, others whispered about assassination attempts. A few mentioned the old stories about peasant uprisings. The castle gates loomed before them, massive constructs of iron and oak that had stood for 500 years. Ilara had never been this close to them, had never imagined she would be. The walls stretched up impossibly high, decorated with carved wolves that seemed to watch her pass, with golden eyes, that reminded her painfully of no, it couldn't be. The great hall was alive with music and laughter that died instantly as the massive doors swung open. Hundreds of nobles in their finest clothing turned to stare as Ilara was hauled forward, her flower-covered dress and crooked fingers making her grotesquely out of place among such grandeur. The hall itself was overwhelming, ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow, pillars thick as ancient trees, tapestries depicting the great Alpha victories throughout history. At the far end, on a dais that put them above everyone else, sat the great Alpha Lords of the realm. Ilara recognized some from portraits and statues. Lord Commander Garrison, with his scarred face and military bearing. Lady Blackwood, whose beauty was supposedly matched only by her cruelty. Duke Harrington, who controlled the eastern trade routes. Their presence was like a physical weight in the air, alpha pheromones creating an atmosphere of dominance that made every instinct in Ilara's body scream to run. And at the center, on the throne that had sat empty for 3 months since the old Alpha King's death, was a young man Ilara had never seen before. Hair the color of storm clouds, elegantly styled, but somehow still giving the impression of wildness. A face that was all sharp angles and regal beauty, the kind of face that would be painted by master artists and carved into monuments. He wore black and silver, the colors of mourning and kingship combined, and a circlet of white gold rested on his brow. But it was his eyes that made Ilara's heart stop. Golden eyes, burning with an inner fire that seemed to see straight through flesh and bone to the soul beneath. Eyes she had last seen looking up at her from a nest of moth-eaten blankets in a cold alley. Eyes that had watched her with trust as she tended wounds that should have killed any normal wolf. "Bring her forward," the king commanded, and his voice, that voice sent lightning down Ilara's spine. Deep and resonant, it filled the hall without effort, a voice meant for command. But she knew that voice, had heard it in growls and whines, in the grateful sounds of an injured wolf accepting food from a stranger's hand. The soldiers forced her to her knees at the foot of the dais. The stone was cold even through her worn dress, and this close, the king's scent washed over her, pine and iron, and something wild that made her instincts both cower and sing. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and utterly familiar. 3 months ago, the king began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. I was betrayed by someone I trusted, Lord Thaddeus, whom my father appointed as provincial governor, attempted to assassinate me during what was meant to be a routine hunt. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Lord Thaddeus, standing among the provincial governors, had gone very pale, his hand moving toward his sword. He used wolfsbane poisoned blades, the king continued, his eyes never leaving Ilara's face. A poison specifically designed to prevent alpha healing, to trap us in our wolf forms, to make us die slowly and in agony. I escaped, but barely. The poison corrupted my ability to shift, trapping me in my wolf form, and my strength was failing. I ran until I could run no more, until I collapsed in the lowest district of Thornhaven, certain I would die alone and unmourned. The hall was absolutely silent now, hundreds of nobles hanging on every word. A peasant woman found me there, the king said, and something in his voice softened. She should have run. By law, by tradition, by every rule of our society, she should have feared me. She should have reported me to the authorities for a reward that would have fed her for a year. Instead, she fed me from her own meager rations. Bread she'd saved for her breakfast, meat that was meant to last her a week. She tended my wounds with herbs that cost her wages she couldn't afford to lose. She wrapped my injuries with cloth, torn from her own clothing, leaving herself cold so I might heal. Ilara felt tears burning her eyes, but didn't dare wipe them away. Around her the nobles were whispering, some in shock, others in calculation, many in disbelief. For 7 days, the king continued, this woman cared for me. She didn't know who I was. To her, I was simply a wounded animal in need of help. She talked to me in those dark hours before dawn, shared her pain and her losses, spoke of injustices I had never seen from my privileged position. She told me about her sister, dead by her own hand, rather than continue suffering at Lord Thaddeus's hands. Thaddeus's face went from pale to ashen. Several nobles stepped away from him. When she realized I was dying of infection, she risked flogging or worse to gather herbs from the royal forest. She stayed with me through the night, missing work for the first time in years, knowing she would be beaten for it. And she was Master Cromwell broke 2 of her fingers as punishment, yet she came back that very night to check on me, her hands wrapped in bloody rags, still worried about my welfare above her own. The king descended from his throne, each step deliberate, measured. His boots clicked against the stone with a rhythm like a heartbeat. He stopped directly before Ilara, and this close, the similarity was undeniable. The way he tilted his head when considering something, the careful grace of his movements, even the way his eyes softened when they met hers. This was her wolf in human form. And when Lord Thaddeus came hunting for me, the king said, his voice dropping to something more intimate, though it still carried throughout the hall, "This woman warned me, helped me escape, even though harboring me meant certain death if discovered. She saved my life not once, but 3 times, first with food, then with medicine, finally with warning." He knelt. The king of Thornhaven knelt before a peasant woman, and the scandalized gasps from the nobility were music to Ilara's ears. "You saved my life," the king said softly, taking her damaged hands in his, gentle with her crooked fingers. "You showed me kindness when you had every reason to show only fear. You, a peasant with nothing, gave everything to save someone you thought was just an animal." I didn't know," Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know you were—" "I know," the king said, and there was something warm in his eyes now, something that made her chest tight. "That's what makes it all the more precious. You helped me not because of what I was, but despite what you thought I might be. You saw a creature in pain and chose compassion over safety." He stood, helping her to her feet with careful hands, then turned to address the hall. His voice took on the ring of royal decree. "Lord Thaddeus of Thornhaven, step forward." The governor approached on unsteady legs, his usual arrogance crumbling. "Your Majesty, I can explain—" "Can you?" The king's voice was dangerously quiet. "Can you explain the wolfsbane? Can you explain the ambush? Can you explain why you've spent 3 months desperately searching for any trace of me, not to ensure my safety, but to finish what you started? Can you explain the systematic abuse of those under your protection, driving innocent young women to take their own lives rather than endure another day of your cruelty? Your father promised me—" "My father is dead," the king cut him off, "and whatever promises he made died with him. You attempted regicide. You would have succeeded if not for the intervention of someone you consider worthless. Guards, arrest him." "No!" Thaddeus snarled, and suddenly there was a blade in his hand, but instead of attacking the king, he lunged at Ilara, the blade aimed directly at her heart. "If I'm going down, I'm taking your peasant whore with me." Ilara saw it coming but couldn't move fast enough, her abused body too slow to dodge. But the king moved faster than should have been possible, his form blurring as he shifted partially. Not fully wolf, but something in between, something terrifying and magnificent. One clawed hand caught Thaddeus's wrist, crushing it with an audible crack. The blade clattered to the floor as Thaddeus screamed. The other hand wrapped around the governor's throat, lifting him off his feet with no visible effort. "You would dare," the king growled, and his voice was more wolf than man, "to threaten what is mine." He threw Thaddeus across the hall like a rag doll. The governor crashed into a pillar and crumpled, unconscious or dead. Ilara couldn't tell and found she didn't care. This was the man who'd destroyed her sister, who'd caused so much suffering. If he was dead, the world was better for it. The king turned back to her, his form shifting fully human again, though his eyes still blazed with predatory fury. "Are you hurt?" His hands ghosted over her arms and shoulders, checking for injury without quite touching. No, Your Majesty." "Cassian," he corrected gently. "My name is Cassian. I wanted to tell you so many times while you bandaged my wounds and shared your bread." "Cassian," she repeated, tasting the name. He smiled, and it transformed his face from regal to almost boyish. Then he turned to address the hall again. "Let this be a lesson to all who would threaten those under my protection. Lord Thaddeus will face trial for treason, and if found guilty, which he will be, will face execution." As guards dragged Thaddeus's limp form away, Cassian turned back to Ilara. "There's something else," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Master Cromwell of the bakery, step forward." Cromwell, who had been trying to blend into the crowd, shuffled forward on shaking legs. "Your Majesty, you broke this woman's fingers for missing work she missed while saving her king's life. I didn't know. No, you didn't. But you've beaten her regularly for 3 years, stolen her wages, subjected her to cruelties I won't repeat in polite company." Cassian's eyes were cold as winter ice. "Your bakery and all its assets are hereby confiscated by the crown. You'll work in the mines for the next 10 years, and perhaps honest labor will teach you the value of those who actually work for their bread." As Cromwell was dragged away sobbing, Cassian returned his attention to Ilara. "Now for you," he raised his voice so all could hear. "Ilara of Thornhaven, you saved your king through kindness, courage, and sacrifice. You gave when you had nothing to give. You risked everything for someone, something that your world told you to fear." He took her hands again, gentle with her crooked fingers. "I name you Lady Ilara, with lands and title equal to any duchess in this realm. You will have a seat on my council, your voice equal to any Alpha Lord's. Your insights into the struggles of our people's most vulnerable will guide my reign." The hall erupted in chaos. Nobles shouted in outrage, some in shock, others in calculation. A peasant-made nobility, not just minor nobility, but equal to a duchess, was unprecedented, unthinkable. Lady Blackwood stood from her place at the high table, her beautiful face twisted with disdain. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot mean to elevate a peasant to such a position. The nobility will never accept. The nobility will accept what I decree." Cassian interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Or they will find themselves replaced by those who will. I have spent 3 months traveling these lands in secret, seeing how my governors and lords really rule when they think no one is watching. The cruelty I have witnessed, the injustice I have seen, ends now." Duke Harrington stood as well, his weathered face thoughtful. "Your Majesty, while change may be inevitable, surely such radical shifts should be implemented gradually. The social order has existed for 1,000 years. And in those 1,000 years, how many have suffered needlessly?" Cassian's voice rang with conviction. "How many brilliant minds have been wasted because they bore the wrong birth? How many innovations have we lost because we refused to see past bloodlines? No, Duke Harrington, the time for gradual change has passed." He looked at Ilara, and his expression softened. "This woman saved me with herbs she gathered, medical knowledge passed between peasant women for generations, knowledge that nobles ignore because it comes from the wrong source. She showed more courage than any warrior, more compassion than any priest, more nobility than any lord I've known. But I'm nobody," Ilara whispered, overwhelmed. "I'm just—" "You're the woman who saved a wolf," Cassian said firmly. "You're the woman who showed me what true strength looks like. You're the woman who gave me hope that this kingdom could be better than it is." The coronation proceeded, despite the tension in the hall. The high priest, an ancient alpha whose disapproval radiated from every line of his body, performed the ceremony with obvious reluctance. But when the crown touched Cassian's head, when the power of it settled around him like a mantle, there was no denying his authority. "I am Cassian Blackstone," the king announced, speaking his name publicly for the first time. "Son of Marcus, grandson of Aldwyn, heir to the throne of Thornhaven and all its territories. But I am also the wolf who was saved by a peasant woman's kindness. I am the alpha who learned that true strength is not in domination, but in protection, not in superiority, but in service." He held out his hand to Ilara. "Stand beside me as I take my oath." "I can't. The traditions that harm are not worth preserving," Cassian said firmly. "Please, Ilara, I face death alone. I would not face life the same way." With trembling fingers, crooked fingers that would be healed by the best physicians in the land, Cassian had already decided. Ilara took the offered hand. Together they faced the assembled nobility as Cassian spoke the ancient oath, though he added words that had never been part of it before. I swear to rule with justice for all, not just the powerful. I swear to protect the vulnerable, not just the strong. I swear to see worth in every soul, regardless of their birth. This I swear by the moon that blessed our ancestors, by the wolf that runs in our blood, and by the kindness of a peasant woman who saved a king. The feast that followed was the most awkward in the castle's history. Ilara found herself seated at the king's right hand, wearing hastily procured fine clothes that felt alien against her skin. She kept expecting someone to realize the mistake, to drag her back to the kitchens where she belonged. But Cassian never left her side, introducing her to nobles who could barely hide their disgust, deflecting their barbed comments with royal authority and sharp wit. When Lady Pemberton made a snide remark about peasant table manners, Cassian reminded everyone that Ilara had kept him alive with food she couldn't afford to spare, which was more than any noble had done for their king. "Tell me," Lord Marcus of Westmarch said, one of the few nobles who seemed genuinely curious rather than hostile, "what do you think your first act as a duchess will be?" Ilara thought of the Omega servant with missing teeth, of the children starving in winter, of her sister's unmarked grave. "I want to establish sanctuaries," she said quietly, "places where those suffering abuse can go for help, where Lord Pemberton's servant could flee to, where my sister could have gone instead of—" She trailed off. "That's revolutionary," Marcus said, but he sounded intrigued rather than dismissive. "It would undermine the absolute authority of noble households." "Good," Cassian said firmly. "Absolute authority corrupts absolutely. It's time for accountability." As the evening progressed, Ilara noticed something strange happening. Servants throughout the hall were standing straighter. They were meeting nobles' eyes. Some were even smiling. The elevation of a peasant to duchess had sent a message more powerful than any decree. Change was possible. Near midnight, Cassian led her to a balcony overlooking the city. The lower district was clearly visible, smoke rising from countless chimneys, the narrow street she knew so well looking like dark veins from this height. "I need to tell you something," Cassian said, his voice serious. "When I was a wolf, when you talked to me, I understood every word. Your pain, your losses, your dreams. They shaped me more than you know." "You heard about Mira," Ilara said softly. "I did. And I swear to you, her death will not be in vain. We'll change this kingdom, Ilara. Not just with laws, but with action. No more Lord Thaddeus, no more Master Cromwells, no more sisters jumping from towers because death is preferable to life." "It won't be easy," Ilara warned. "The nobility won't give up their power willingly." "No," Cassian agreed. "But they'll learn that power shared is power strengthened, not weakened." He turned to her fully, and in his golden eyes she saw the wolf she'd saved, vulnerable and trusting. "I need you beside me, Ilara, not just as a symbol, but as my conscience, my guide. You know this kingdom's pain in ways I never could." "I'm not educated," she protested. "I can barely read. You'll learn, and until then, you have wisdom that can't be taught in any school." He took her hands again, careful with her injured fingers. "That week in the alley, you told me about your mother's lullabies, about birds and freedom and places where the sun always shines. Help me build that place." Over the following weeks, Ilara was given a crash course in noble life. To her surprise, Lord Commander Garrison became her strongest supporter among the established nobility. "You've got steel in you, Lady Ilara," the scarred warrior said, after she'd argued passionately for military reform in a council meeting. "Most lords wouldn't dare contradict the king so directly." "I'm not contradicting him," Ilara protested. "I'm offering perspective. Forced conscription of peasants just creates resentful soldiers, which is exactly what His Majesty needs to hear." Garrison studied her with eyes that had seen too many battles. "I've served 3 kings. You're Cassian. He's different, better, and you're part of why." But not everyone was supportive. Within a week, there were 2 attempts on Ilara's life. The first was poison in her wine, detected only because her years of hunger had given her an acute sense for anything off in food. The second was more direct, an assassin in her chambers who hadn't expected a peasant to fight back. Ilara had broken the woman's nose with a candlestick and held her at knife point until guards arrived. Years of fighting off drunk men who thought peasant women were free entertainment had taught her to be vicious when cornered. When Cassian heard about it, his fury was terrifying to behold. He partially shifted right there in the council chamber, claws extending, eyes going fully wolf. "Double the guard," he ordered Garrison. "Anyone who threatens Duchess Ilara threatens me. Make sure everyone understands that." "Your Majesty," Lady Blackwood said during the next council meeting, "perhaps these attacks are a sign. The Duchess clearly cannot handle the pressures of—" "The Duchess," Ilara interrupted, still getting used to referring to herself that way, "is sitting right here and can speak for herself. And what I have to say is this: I've survived 23 years of systematic oppression, regular beatings, starvation, and watching everyone I loved die or disappear. A few assassination attempts from nobles who can't stand change. That's just Tuesday for someone from the lower district." Duke Harrington actually laughed at that. "By the moon, she's got more balls than half the alphas at this table. I'm starting to see why you chose her, Your Majesty." "I didn't choose her," Cassian said quietly. "She chose me. She chose to help a dying wolf when it would have been safer to walk away. Everything else follows from that moment of compassion." As autumn deepened, Ilara threw herself into her new role with the same determination that had kept her alive all those years. She reviewed tax codes, finding the 100 ways they punish the poor for being poor. She investigated labor laws, documenting the loopholes that allowed virtual slavery. She gathered testimony from peasants, servants, and omegas who had never before had anyone in power willing to listen. Her sanctuaries were established despite fierce opposition. The first one opened in the lower district, in a building that had once been a workhouse where peasants too old or sick to work were left to die. Now it was a place of healing and hope, staffed by peasant women who knew the herbs and treatments nobles scorned, funded by fines levied against nobles convicted of abuse. Lord Pemberton's Omega servant was the first to seek sanctuary, arriving in the middle of the night with fresh bruises and broken ribs. Within a week, there were 50 others. Within a month, 300. "You're starting a revolution," Cassian said one evening, finding her in the sanctuary's main hall where she was helping serve dinner to the residents. "Good," Ilara replied, ladling soup into bowls. "This kingdom needs one." Winter arrived early and harsh, the kind that killed the poor in droves. But this year was different. By royal decree and Ilara's insistence, the noble storehouses were opened. Grain that would have rotted while merchants waited for prices to rise was distributed to the hungry. Empty noble mansions were converted to shelters. For the first time in memory, the death toll in the lower district decreased rather than increased. It was during the first snowfall that Cassian found Ilara in the castle gardens, staring at the moon. She was wearing a fur cloak now, ermine, worth more than she'd made in her entire life at the bakery, but underneath he knew she still wore simple clothes. The Duchess, who couldn't forget she was a peasant. "Regrets?" he asked, joining her on the bench. "Never," she said immediately, "but sometimes I feel like I'm dreaming, like I'll wake up and be back in that cold room above the bakery, with Cromwell screaming for me to get to work." "You're not dreaming," Cassian assured her. "Though sometimes I feel the same, like I'll wake up dying in that alley, having imagined a peasant woman brave enough to save me." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Cassian spoke again. "The council is pressuring me to marry." Ilara's heart sank, though she kept her face neutral. Of course, he was the king. He needed heirs, needed to marry someone appropriate. Another alpha probably, or at least a highborn beta. Not a peasant woman with crooked fingers and too many scars. "I've refused them all," Cassian continued, and her head snapped up to look at him. "Every portrait, every proposal, every suitable match, because they're not you." "Cassian," she breathed. "I love you," he said simply. "I fell in love with your kindness before I ever saw your face. Every day since, watching you fight for those who have no voice, seeing your strength, your compassion. I love you, Ilara." Not as king to duchess, not as alpha to peasant, but as the wolf you saved to the woman who saved him. That's impossible, Ilara whispered, though her heart was racing. The law, the tradition, I am the law, Cassian said firmly. And traditions that keep me from marrying the woman I love are traditions that need to die. He slid from the bench to kneel in the snow, taking her hands in his. Marry me, Ilara. Not because you're a duchess now, not because I can give you castles and gold, but because you're the woman who looked at a dying wolf and chose to help. Because you're the only person who's ever seen all of me, king and wolf, alpha and wounded soul, and loved me anyway. You don't know that I love you, Ilara pointed out, though she was smiling through tears. Don't I? Cassian smiled back. You told the wolf your deepest secrets. You cried when you thought I might die. You came back even after Cromwell broke your fingers. If that's not love, I don't know what is. The nobility will revolt, Ilara said. A peasant queen? It's unheard of. Good, Cassian said. Let them try. I've faced assassination, betrayal, and transformation. I didn't survive all of that to let fear dictate my choices. Be my queen, Ilara. Help me build a kingdom where no one has to suffer like you did, where no sister has to jump from a tower, where no wolf dies alone in an alley. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, you magnificent, impossible man. Yes. When he kissed her, it was gentle and fierce at once, full of promise and passion. When they pulled apart, snow was falling around them like a blessing. The announcement of their engagement sent shock waves that made Ilara's elevation to duchess seem like a minor tremor. 3 duchies threatened to secede. 2 neighboring kingdoms sent declarations that they would not recognize a peasant queen. Lord Garrett, one of Thaddeus's supporters, organized what he called a coalition of concerned nobles to demand the king reconsider. Cassian's response was to hold the most elaborate wedding the kingdom had ever seen, inviting not just nobility, but thousands of common people. For the first time in history, peasants would stand in the Great Hall as guests, not servants. The wedding day dawned bright and cold. Ilara stood before a mirror in the Queen's chambers, her chambers soon, wearing a gown of silver and gold that incorporated both royal colors and symbols of the common people. Her crooked fingers had been healed by the kingdom's best physicians, but she'd kept one small scar on her palm, a reminder of where she'd come from. The ceremony was performed by Sister Catherine, an elderly peasant woman who ran one of Ilara's sanctuaries, another break with tradition that had the high priests in uproar. As Ilara walked down the aisle, she saw faces in the crowd. Mrs. Harwick from the laundry weeping with joy, Thomas the street sweeper standing proud in new clothes, Lord Marcus nodding approvingly, Duke Harrington actually smiling. Even some of the hostile nobles looked thoughtful rather than angry. Her reforms had brought prosperity they couldn't deny. You came into my life when I was dying, Cassian said in his vows, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. You saved me not once but again and again, with food, with medicine, with hope. You showed me a kingdom I never knew existed, one where kindness persists despite cruelty, where strength comes from surviving, not dominating. I promise to love you as you loved me, without condition, without reservation, without fear. You trusted me when you had no reason to trust anyone, Ilara replied in her vows. You gave me purpose when I had only survival. You saw me as more than my birth, more than my station, more than my scars. I promise to stand beside you, not behind you, to challenge you when you need challenging, to comfort you when you need comfort, and to never let you forget that beneath the crown, you're still the wolf who needed help, just as beneath the title, I'm still the woman who gave it. The celebration lasted a week. On the 3rd night, Lord Garrett made his move, leading 50 armed nobles in an attempt to storm the castle. They expected to find only guards. Instead, they found the entire lower district standing in defense of their king and queen, armed with everything from pitchforks to stolen swords. You think you can overthrow us? Cassian asked, standing with Ilara at his side as Garrett was brought before them in chains. "Look around you. This isn't about noble versus peasant anymore. This is about the future versus the past, and the future has already won." Garrett was stripped of his titles and sent to work in the fields he'd once owned, learning what it meant to earn bread by the sweat of his brow. It became the standard punishment for nobles who couldn't adapt. Not death, but education through labor. Years passed. The kingdom prospered under what historians would later call the golden age of the common crown. Innovations flowed from minds previously ignored. Art flourished as peasant stories were finally told. The military became the strongest in the known world by promoting based on merit rather than birth. Ilara established schools throughout the kingdom where peasant children learned alongside noble ones. She created a healthcare system that didn't discriminate based on wealth. She reformed the legal system to give voice to the voiceless. And through it all, she never forgot where she came from. Every morning, she still woke early, the habit of a lifetime of labor. Every meal, she remembered hunger. Every cold night, she thought of those who might be freezing. When their first child was born, a daughter with Cassian's golden eyes and Ilara's determined chin, they named her Hope. "Because that's what you gave me," Cassian said, holding their daughter while Ilara recovered. "Hope that kindness could triumph over cruelty." "That's what you gave me too," Ilara replied, touching their daughter's tiny hand. "Hope that things could change." Their second child, a son, they named Marcus after Ilara's favorite memory of her mother, a summer day when her mother had found enough coin to buy them both fresh bread, and they'd eaten it by the river, pretending to be nobility on a picnic. Their third, another daughter, they named Mira. The children grew up seeing their parents not as king and queen primarily, but as papa and mama who happened to wear crowns. They played with servants' children, attended the public schools, learned that leadership meant service. They knew their mother's story, knew their father had once been a dying wolf, knew that love could bridge any gap if it was brave enough. One day, when Hope was 10, a delegation from a neighboring kingdom arrived. Their leader, King Roderick, was old-fashioned and disapproving, accompanied by his son, Prince Aldwin, a young alpha who sneered at everything he saw. "I cannot believe," Roderick said at dinner loud enough for all to hear, "that Thornhaven has fallen so low as to have a peasant queen. What next? Shall we make horses senators? Shall we crown chickens?" Before Cassian could respond, Hope stood up. 10 years old, tiny but fierce, she faced the foreign king without fear. "My mother saved my father's life when he was nothing but a dying wolf," she said clearly. "She gave when she had nothing. She healed when she had no training. She loved when she had every reason to hate. If that's not nobility, then I don't want to be noble. And horses would probably make better senators than some people. At least they know the value of hard work." The hall erupted in laughter, and King Roderick left the next morning, his trade agreements unsigned. Thornhaven didn't need them anyway. Their prosperity came from within now, not from pleasing other kingdoms. 20 years into their reign, an assassination attempt finally succeeded, partially. The poisoned blade meant for Ilara found Cassian instead when he threw himself in front of her. For 3 days, he lingered between life and death, the wolfsbane poison burning through his system. Ilara never left his side, using every herb, every technique her mother had taught her, everything she'd learned saving him the first time. The kingdom held its breath, peasants and nobles alike praying for their king who'd changed everything. On the fourth dawn, Cassian opened his eyes. "You saved me again," he whispered. "You saved me first," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "That makes us even." He recovered, though slower than before. The poison had aged him, streaks of silver appearing in his storm cloud hair. But he wore them proudly. Battle scars, he called them, from the war to change the world. 30 years into their reign, they stood together on the castle balcony, watching as the newest sanctuary opened, the 100th in the kingdom. The crowd below was massive, peasants and nobles mingling freely, children playing without concern for bloodlines or birthmarks. "Do you remember," Cassian asked, "what you told me that first night? About your mother's lullabies? About birds and freedom and places where the sun always shines?" Ilara recalled. "I said there was no such place for people like us. Look," Cassian said, gesturing to the crowd below, where a peasant girl was laughing with a noble boy, where former slaves now owned businesses, where the sun did indeed shine on everyone equally. "We built it, Ilara. We built your mother's lullaby." "We did," she agreed, leaning against him, "though I never imagined it would involve so much paperwork." He laughed, still that same warm sound that had rumbled from a wolf's chest all those years ago. "Worth it? Every second," she affirmed. "Every struggle, every fight, every moment of doubt. Worth it to see no child go hungry, no woman jump from towers, no wolf die alone in alleys." As they stood there, Hope approached with her own children, twins who carried both the nobility of their grandfather's line and the strength of their grandmother's peasant blood. They would inherit a kingdom profoundly different from the one Ilara had been born into. "Tell us the story, Grandmama," one twin begged, "about the peasant and the wolf." "Again?" Ilara laughed. "You've heard it 100 times." "Please," the other twin insisted. "It's our favorite." So Ilara told it again, as she had so many times before, to so many audiences. But this time, she noticed something different. The children didn't gasp when she revealed the wolf was the king. To them, it seemed natural that kindness would be rewarded, that love could cross any boundary, that a peasant could become queen. They had grown up in the world she and Cassian had built, where such things weren't miraculous but normal. When the story ended, the twins ran off to play, and Hope sat beside her mother. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't fed the wolf?" "Every day," Ilara admitted. "Your father would have died. I would have continued at the bakery until Cromwell killed me, or I died of exhaustion. Thousands would have continued suffering. The kingdom would have stagnated." She paused. "But I did feed the wolf. That's what matters." That night, there was an attempt at revolution. Not from the nobles this time, but from a group of young radicals who felt change wasn't happening fast enough. They stormed the castle, demanding immediate abolition of all titles, redistribution of all wealth, execution of all former nobles. Cassian and Ilara met them in the throne room, not with soldiers, but with words. "I understand your anger," Ilara told them. "I lived it for 23 years. But change force too quickly breaks rather than bends. We've transformed this kingdom without civil war, without mass bloodshed. Yes, it's been slow. Yes, there's more to do. But look how far we've come." "Pretty words from someone wearing a crown," their leader spat. "This crown was placed on a peasant's head," Ilara reminded him. "By a king who chose love over tradition. Every law we've passed, every reform we've made, has been to ensure no one suffers as I suffered. But if we tear everything down overnight, who suffers most? The poor, as always. Revolution sounds glorious, but it's the common people who pay its price in blood." She stood, removing her crown and setting it aside. "I'm still Ilara, from the lower district. I still remember hunger, cold, fear, but I also remember that lasting change comes from building up, not just tearing down. Join us in building, help us go faster, challenge us when we're too slow. But don't destroy what we've built. Too many lives depend on it." The radicals left peacefully, many eventually joining the government, pushing for faster reform from within. It was another victory for the approach Cassian and Ilara had always taken: inclusion over exclusion, evolution over revolution. 40 years into their reign, they announced their abdication, passing the crown to Hope, who had been trained since birth to continue their work. The ceremony was held not in the castle, but in the lower district, in the very alley where Ilara had first found Cassian. "This is where our story began," Cassian told the crowd. "A peasant woman and a dying wolf, both victims of a cruel system, finding each other in the darkness. Today we pass the crown to one who has never known that darkness. who was born into the light we fought to create. Hope took the crown with tears in her eyes. "I swear to continue what you started," she promised. "To never forget that every person matters, that kindness is strength, that love conquers tradition." As they walked away from the ceremony, no longer king and queen, but simply Cassian and Ilara, she asked him, "What now?" "Now," he said, taking her hand with fingers that had age spots to match her own. "We rest. We've earned it." They retired to a modest cottage on the edge of the forest, refusing the grand estate the nobles tried to give them. Cassian would shift to wolf form and run through the trees, while Ilara tended a garden full of healing herbs she gave freely to any who needed them. Children from the nearby village would visit, never quite believing that the old woman who taught them about plants and the old wolf who let them ride on his back were the legendary king and queen who'd changed the world. One day, a young peasant girl arrived at their door, carrying a wounded fox. "Please," she begged Ilara, "can you help? Everyone says you know healing." Ilara smiled, seeing herself 50 years younger in the girl's desperate compassion. "Bring it here, child. Let's see what we can do." As she worked on the fox, teaching the girl about herbs and bandages, she caught Cassian watching from the doorway in his wolf form, his golden eyes warm with memory. Later, after the girl had left with the healing fox, Cassian shifted back to human form. "Full circle," he said softly. "Perhaps she'll discover the fox is secretly a prince," Ilara teased. "Perhaps," Cassian agreed. "Or perhaps she'll just learn that kindness doesn't need a reward to be worthwhile." They grew old together, as they'd done everything else together. When the end came, it came gently. They passed within hours of each other, Ilara's hand resting on Cassian's chest, his arms around her. They were found by Hope, who said they both looked peaceful, like they were just sleeping. The funeral was attended by thousands, peasants and nobles, wolves and humans, young and old, all united in grief for the couple who had united them in life. Hope spoke through tears. "They taught us that love is not limited by law, that strength is not determined by birth, that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change the course of history. My mother was a peasant who fed a wolf. My father was a king who remembered kindness. Together, they built a kingdom where no one needs to die in alleys, where no one needs to jump from towers, where everyone has hope." They were buried together in a simple grave in the castle gardens, marked only with, "Here, like Cassian and Ilara Blackstone." They chose love over fear, kindness over cruelty, change over tradition. In feeding a wolf, she fed the future. In saving a peasant, he saved a kingdom. But their true monument wasn't stone, it was the kingdom itself, fundamentally transformed. Within a generation, the very concept of peasants and nobles had begun to fade, replaced by citizens, all equal under law. The sanctuaries had evolved into hospitals and schools. The reforms they'd started had spread to neighboring kingdoms, then across the continent. 100 years later, when historians wrote about the great transformation that ended feudalism and began the modern age, they all agreed it started with one moment: a peasant woman choosing to feed a stray wolf, never knowing he was the Alpha King. In the schools that Ilara had founded, children learned the story as historical fact, but also as a moral lesson. Every act of kindness matters. Every person has worth. Love can bridge any divide. And sometimes, the smallest gesture, sharing your bread with someone hungry, can change the world. The story was told and retold, each generation adding their own understanding. Some focused on the romance, others on the political revolution, still others on the spiritual transformation of a kingdom, learning to see past surface differences. But always, at its heart, the story remained simple. In choosing compassion over safety, in seeing pain and responding with help rather than indifference, Ilara had not just saved a king, she had saved a kingdom's soul. And in recognizing and elevating that compassion, Cassian had not just rewarded kindness, he had made it the foundation of a new world. The cottage where they'd retired became a shrine of sorts, visited by those seeking inspiration. The alley where they'd first met was preserved, with a plaque that read, "On this spot, kindness defeated cruelty. Let all who pass remember, we are not defined by our birth, but by our choices. Choose kindness. Choose love. Choose to see the wolf as worthy of bread, the peasant as worthy of crown. Choose to feed the hungry, heal the wounded, help the desperate. In such choices, kingdoms are transformed." And in the castle, in the throne room, where Hope's descendants ruled with wisdom learned from their ancestors, a simple wooden bowl was displayed in a place of honor. The bowl Ilara had used to give water to a dying wolf. It was worth more than all the crown jewels combined, for it represented the moment when everything changed. The bowl was eventually stolen by those who thought it had magical properties, but Hope's daughter, Queen Mira, refused to search for it. "Let them have it," she said. The magic was never in the bowl. It was in the hands that filled it, the heart that chose to share it. That magic can't be stolen, it can only be emulated. And it was, again and again, as the story spread beyond Thornhaven, beyond the continent, becoming legend, then myth, then something greater, a truth so fundamental that its origin was almost forgotten, even as its message endured. Kindness transcends class, love transcends law, and sometimes a peasant feeding a wolf can transform the world. But in Thornhaven, they never forgot. Every year, on the anniversary of that first meeting, the monarch, whether king or queen, whether born high or low, would walk to the lower district and leave bread in that alley. Not for ceremony, but as a reminder that power comes with responsibility, that every person deserves dignity, and that the greatest strength of any kingdom lies not in its armies or treasures, but in the compassion of its people. The tradition continued for generations, long after the alley had been transformed into a beautiful plaza, long after poverty had been eliminated, long after the very concepts of peasant and noble had faded into history. Because the lesson remained relevant. We are all capable of being the peasant with bread to share, and we are all, at times, the wolf in need of kindness. And so the story ends as it began, with an act of compassion that seemed small at the time, but whose ripples would spread across centuries, touching countless lives, transforming an entire world. Ilara had thought she was just feeding a hungry animal. Cassian had thought he was just trying to survive. Neither knew they were writing the first chapter of a new world. But perhaps that's how all great changes begin. Not with grand gestures or deliberate revolution, but with simple human kindness. One person reaching out to another in their moment of need, choosing love over fear, choosing to see the person beneath the surface, choosing to share their bread even when they have little to spare. The peasant fed a stray wolf, never knowing he was the Alpha King, and in doing so, she fed the future itself.